7 years ago, my life changed in ways I never thought possible. My wife, Linda, left without warning. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, something I could never have imagined. At the time, our daughter, Rosie, was just 16. I was trying to hold it all together, but her departure shattered everything. My name is James Daniels, and I'm 57 years old. I'm standing at a crossroads now, trying to make sense of what's happening with my daughter. But to truly understand, I need to take you back to the beginning. I met Linda when I was 22. She was 20, a bright young woman with a laugh that could light up any room, a presence that made everyone feel seen and important. We met at a college party, locked eyes across the room, and from that moment, we just clicked. It was one of those stories you read about in books. We dated for 3 years before I proposed to her on a snowy night in the park. The snowflakes fell gently around us as I asked, and with tears in her eyes, she said yes. I thought that was the start of forever. We got married in a quiet ceremony, just close family and friends. Linda looked breathtaking in her white dress, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. The first few years were filled with joy. Like any couple, we had our moments, but nothing seemed insurmountable. We even bought a little house in a peaceful neighborhood, and we made it our own. It was cozy, perfect. Then, Rosie was born, and my world grew brighter. She was the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen, her mother's eyes and my smile. Holding her in my arms, I remember late nights just staring at her, dreaming about the future, wondering what kind of woman she'd become. It was the most fulfilling experience of my life. But as time passed, things began to change. Linda, the vibrant woman I'd fallen in love with, started to drift away. At first, I thought it was a phase, maybe stress, maybe fatigue, but it never seemed to get better. She became distant, detached. Whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she either brushed me off or became defensive. I didn't know what was wrong, and it felt like she wouldn't tell me. The arguments grew, and the tension in the house became unbearable. I'd come home from work, only to be met with anger, sharp words, or cold silences. Then, about a year before she left, Linda told me she needed space. She said she felt trapped, like she couldn't breathe. I was devastated but agreed to give her that space. She moved into the guest room, and the walls between us grew higher. We became strangers, sharing a house but no longer a life. I tried my best to keep things normal for Rosie, but it was hard. Rosie was a teenager, struggling in her own way, and I didn't want her to feel the cracks forming between her mother and me. Linda still cared for Rosie, but it was clear she was battling her own demons. I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe she was going through a midlife crisis, but I never could have imagined what would happen next. One evening, I came home to find a note on the kitchen table. It was from Linda. She said she needed to leave, to find herself, but didn't say where she was going or what she meant by it. The note didn't offer any clarity, only heartbreak. She was gone. And I was left to explain her departure to Rosie. How do you explain that to a 16-year-old? How do you explain why her mother just disappeared without any warning? I told Rosie that her mother loved her very much, but needed to figure some things out in her own life. I lied, but I had to. I didn't know what else to say. It was a devastating time for both of us. In the months that followed, I found out the painful truth. Linda didn't just leave for a personal journey. She left for someone else. She sent me divorce papers, and though it tore me apart, I signed them just to end the agony. Soon after, she married David. I couldn't help but feel inferior. He was everything I wasn't: wealthy, successful. He had the life she wanted, and I couldn't give her that. It broke me, knowing that she'd chosen someone who could offer her the lifestyle I never could. I spent months questioning myself. What had I done wrong? Why wasn't I enough? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been replaced, not just as her husband, but as a father too. David had what I didn't: money, status, the trappings of a perfect life. I was just a man with a regular job, barely enough to keep us afloat. The self-doubt consumed me. Rosie and I struggled through that time, trying to make sense of it all. I put on a brave face for her, but inside, I was falling apart. Rosie tried to be strong, but I knew she was hurting. She missed her mom, and she didn't understand why Linda had left. Over time, I realized I had to pull myself together, not for my own sake, but for hers. As the years passed, things slowly started to settle. Rosie focused on her studies, her friends. We found a new rhythm without Linda. But then, unexpectedly, Linda reached out. Rosie was nervous but excited when she told me her mom had called. She didn't know what to expect, and honestly, neither did I. They began talking on the phone, meeting for coffee. Rosie was cautious, protective of her heart, but I could see she was hopeful. She deserved this. It was good that Linda was coming back into her life. I tried not to worry, to trust that this time would be different. And for a while, it seemed like it was. They spent more time together, and Rosie was happier. She started talking about her mom more often, and though I could tell she was still cautious, I was relieved. Rosie deserved to have her mother in her life, even if it hadn't worked out between us. But then, just a few months ago, everything changed again. Rosie came to me one day, looking serious. She had something to tell me. I thought maybe it was about the wedding planning, something about the dress, the flowers, or the venue. But it wasn't. What she said next hit me like a punch to the gut. She told me that Linda and David had agreed to pay for the entire wedding on one condition: I wasn't invited. They would cover everything, but I wasn't allowed to attend. I couldn't believe it. I sat there, speechless, trying to process the words she had just spoken. I asked her, "Who will walk you down the aisle if I'm not there?" She told me that David had agreed to do it. That hit me harder than anything. The man who had replaced me, the man who had taken my place in her life, was now going to walk her down the aisle. I saw it in her eyes, though the decision had already been made. And my heart broke. I asked her, my voice shaking, "How could you do this to me after everything we've been through together? How could you just cut me out of such an important moment in your life?" Her response was as cold as it was dismissive. She almost seemed irritated by my question, as if she couldn't grasp why I was so hurt. "David's better," she said flatly. "He can afford to pay for the wedding." It was as though my feelings had no place in the conversation, as if all those years I spent raising her, loving her, were meaningless now. The words crushed me. I couldn't believe it. My own daughter, my little girl, the one I had given everything for, was being so heartless. It felt like I had been hit by a train. I told her, "Okay, if that's what you want, then I'm fine with it," but inside, I was shattered. It stung deeper than when Linda had left me. At least then, I had Rosie to hold on to. Now, it felt like I had lost her too. I wasn't a poor man, far from it. I had a steady job, a comfortable life, and I'd always provided for Rosie. But I couldn't give her the extravagant wedding that Linda and David could. They had wealth, connections, things I didn't. But there was one thing I did have, something I had been saving for her all these years, a gift I knew would mean the world to her. My parents had left me a house in a prestigious neighborhood, a property that was far more luxurious than the one I lived in. It was always meant for Rosie. I'd planned to give it to her on her wedding day, a surprise. A symbol of my love for her, a way to help her start her life with the man she chose. But now, with everything that had happened, I wasn't sure. Why give her something so valuable if she didn't even want me there to see her marry? It felt like a cruel joke. The house that had been meant to show my love was suddenly something I wasn't sure would be appreciated. Then there was Lily, my niece. She was 19, sweet and hardworking, always there for me when things got tough. She was studying, working part-time, dreaming big, and had always kept in touch, even when the family wasn't in the best place. She had never asked for much, but she deserved something good in her life. I thought about her often, knowing her family wasn't well off and how much a house like mine would change everything for her. She could live in it, or sell it and use the proceeds for her education, or start a business. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Here was someone who truly valued me, someone who needed the gift more than anyone else. So, I made the decision. I would give the house to Lily. It wasn't an easy choice, not by any means. I had always dreamed of giving it to Rosie. But how could I give such a precious thing to someone who didn't even want me in her life? Lily would appreciate it, and it felt like the right thing to do. When I told Lily, her reaction was pure joy. Her eyes lit up, and she hugged me, thanking me over and over. It was the first time in a long while that I felt like I had done something truly good, something that made a real difference. But that peace was short-lived. Rosie found out. Of course, she did. She called me, but I didn't pick up. The last thing I wanted was another confrontation. The pain was still too fresh. The next day, she showed up at my door. I could see her standing on the porch, her face a mix of determination and frustration. My heart sank. I knew this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation, but I opened the door anyway. She walked in, scanning the place as though she hadn't seen it in years. The air between us was thick with tension. She sat down, her gaze steady. I heard about the house, she started, her voice steady at first, but I could hear the simmering anger just beneath the surface. I thought it was meant for me, she said, and it felt like she was trying to make me feel guilty, trying to manipulate me into changing my mind. She cried, or at least pretended to cry. Her tears welled up, and she looked at me with a sad, almost pitiful expression. I can't believe you do this to me, Dad, she said, her voice trembling. That house is supposed to be mine. It's what I deserve. Her words stung, but I saw through it. Her tears weren't genuine, they felt like part of a performance. She was waiting for me to crumble, to give in, to let the weight of her sorrow convince me to change my decision. How could you choose Lily over me? She sobbed. Don't you love me? It was painful to hear, but something about it felt off. I knew what she was doing, trying to guilt me into reversing my choice. She talked about the wedding, about how beautiful it was going to be, about how much a house like that would mean to her. She said David and Linda were just trying to help her have the best start, and that I was selfish for not supporting her. The more she spoke, the more it sounded like I was the villain in this story. It hurt, but I could see through it. She kept crying, asking why I would do this to her, why I wouldn't walk her down the aisle, why I wasn't supporting her dreams. It was like she was saying whatever she thought would make me change my mind. She even said, "You can still come to the wedding." It was a last-ditch effort to manipulate me, like she was doing me a favor by allowing me to be there. I looked at her and said, "No. I'm done. I'm done being treated like an option." It wasn't just about the house or the wedding. It was about how I had been pushed aside, how my feelings had been disregarded for so long. But now, some of my relatives are telling me that maybe I went too far. They say I should have made amends, that I should have been the bigger person. What do you think? Did I overreact? Update 1. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for your kind words. Your support means more than I can express. I have some updates for you. Things have taken a dramatic turn. After my last post, Rosie kept reaching out to me. She called, texted, and even left voicemails, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed time to heal, to figure out where my feelings really stood. Then, I found out that Rosie isn't getting married anymore. Turns out, she cheated on her fiancé, and he left her. I was shocked, utterly shocked. Apparently, her fiancé came home unexpectedly one day and found her with another man. The details are messy, but the bottom line is that he walked in and caught them together. He didn't give her a chance to explain. He kicked her out right then and there. I found out from a mutual friend, and I was floored. It stirred up so many emotions in me. Part of me felt bad for Rosie, knowing how painful this must be for her. But another part of me felt angry and betrayed. She had made such poor choices, choices that hurt so many people, herself included. The betrayal stung, and it was hard not to wonder if things could have been different if she had made better decisions. Despite everything, Rosie is still my daughter. I don't want to see her hurt. But hearing about what happened brought so many mixed feelings to the surface. It made me question everything, all over again. I didn't know what to feel, but I knew one thing: I wasn't the one who caused this. The message was difficult to send, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I simply said I was sorry to hear about what had happened and hoped she was okay. I didn't bring up the house or the wedding; those felt like territories I couldn't tread just yet. My only focus was to make sure she knew I cared about her well-being. It brought up so many unresolved feelings, feelings I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But, in the end, I felt like I had no choice but to reach out. Things have been tough, no doubt. Since then, Rosie's been staying with Linda and David, and I can't imagine how hard that must be for them, especially with most of the wedding arrangements already set. Part of me wrestles with the feeling that Rosie, in some way, got what she deserved. She betrayed her fiancé in the worst way possible, and now she's facing the consequences of that betrayal. It's a hard truth to swallow, but sometimes we must endure the fallout of our actions to truly grow and change. A month passed since that message, and then, things took an unexpected turn. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but here I am. Rosie and Linda had a massive falling out. From what Rosie told me, it was the culmination of all the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. Linda was furious about how Rosie had treated her fiancé. It was a reflection of everything that had gone wrong, not just for Rosie but for the whole family. The argument was explosive, and Rosie called me in tears, asking if she could stay with me for a while. She told me she couldn't stay there anymore. Things had gotten so bad between them, and she needed a safe place until they could work things out. I won't lie, part of me wanted to help her. She sounded so lost, so desperate, and hearing that desperation broke my heart. But the other part of me, the part that was still raw from the betrayal, knew that I couldn't just welcome her back into my life. It wasn't as simple as offering her a place to stay. There was too much hurt, too much history between us. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I told Rosie I couldn't let her stay with me, and though she pleaded with me to reconsider, I knew I couldn't change my mind. She had nowhere else to go, but I had to be strong. I couldn't let her use me as a crutch when I was still trying to heal myself. As much as I cared about her, I had to prioritize my own healing. I explained to her that I needed space to move forward, that I couldn't be her support right now. It was painful to hear her cries, but I stood my ground. I had made my decision. I couldn't help her, not now. The guilt crept in afterward. Could I have done more? Was I too harsh? But then there was also relief, knowing that I had done what was right for me, even if it wasn't easy. Since that day, Rosie's been staying with a friend. She's been reaching out to other family members, trying to find somewhere permanent. I hope she finds stability, I really do. As for me, I've been focusing on myself. Spending time with friends, diving into hobbies, reflecting on what I want in life. There are ups and downs, of course, but I'm taking it one step at a time. I know some might say I was too harsh, that families should always support each other in times of need. And I get that. I really do. But sometimes, tough love is the only way. Sometimes, you have to set boundaries, even with those you love. And that meant saying no to Rosie. Fast forward to a few days ago. I had no idea what was coming next. I walked into my house after work, expecting a normal evening, only to be greeted by the last person I ever expected to see. There she was, sitting on the couch like it was just another day. Rosie! She still had the spare key I had given her months ago, before everything fell apart. It felt like a punch to the gut. At first, I didn't know what to say. What could I say? She was there, in my living room, uninvited, like it was nothing. I asked her what she was doing there, and she just looked at me, determined, unwilling to leave. She said she had nowhere else to go. She needed a safe place, just for a while, until she figured things out. It was clear that she was in a tough spot. But I couldn't just let her waltz back into my life like nothing had happened. I had to stay calm, but I also had to be firm. I told her, no, she wasn't invited, and she had to leave. I reminded her that I had already said no before, and that hadn't changed. That's when things took a turn. She started to argue. She pleaded, her voice cracking, trying to guilt me into letting her stay. She said I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. It hurt to hear it, but I had to stay strong. I told her that if she didn't leave, I would have to call the police. It was the hardest thing I've had to say. Eventually, she gathered her things and left. I watched as she packed up, disappointment and hurt in her eyes. The weight of it all hit me, but I knew I had done the right thing. A minute after she left, the doorbell rang again. I hesitated, then saw her through the peephole. She wanted to come back in, to grab some of her things. I didn't want to drag it out, so I agreed. I waited downstairs while she went up to her room. It felt like a strange dream, watching her walk through my house again, even just for a few minutes. I wanted to understand, to know what was going through her mind, but I knew it wasn't the right time. 5 minutes later, she came back downstairs with a small bag of her belongings and left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I felt a strange mixture of emotions, sadness, relief, confusion, but above all, I knew I had made the right call. I'm sure some people think I should have let her stay, that I was too harsh, that family should always be there. But sometimes, doing what's best for you means making hard choices. And for me, that meant setting those boundaries. Now, a final update. Some of my relatives found this Reddit thread, and Rosie saw it. She was furious. She confronted me about sharing our private struggles with strangers on the internet. She felt betrayed, like I had violated her trust. But I explained that sharing my story was my way of processing everything, of finding support from others who could understand. And here's the positive part, Rosie has found a place of her own. It's a small studio, just 25 minutes away from me. It's a start. It's a step toward independence and stability. I'm proud of her for taking that step, and I hope it's the beginning of her healing journey. I also wanted to share a bit of good news. My niece, Lily, is thrilled about the new place. I took her to see it, and she was absolutely over the moon. She's in college now, but I promised her that if she finds a job nearby, she can move into the house. It's not official yet, but we're working out the details. I want everything to be perfect for her, without any stress about taxes or legalities. Lastly, I just want to thank all of you. Your support has meant the world to me. Your kind words, your advice, your understanding, it's been a lifeline. I couldn't have navigated this journey without you. So, thank you.